The diplomacy rulebook is not exactly precise on what happens in every scenario. You'll be familiar probably with people asking what happens here or what happens there. It's a confusing game in general, but there are some very specific moves that the rulebook doesn't even cover. This meant that way back when people played on the boards, and just on the boards or by mail, the GM would have to make a decision on what moves they'd allow and what moves they'd disallow, and you had just different ways of resolving orders all over the place. More recently, a man, and I apologize if I pronounce this completely incorrectly, but I believe he's called Lukas Krishvik, created the Diplomacy Adjudicator test cases, which were a way of making sure every online diplomacy site, or every diplomacy adjudicator in general, anything that automatically resolved orders, would resolve orders in a way that followed the rulebook. Now, it has some points in it where it says, you can either do this or do this, and then it will recommend one of the two. It usually does that when the rulebook isn't clear. One of the scenarios where the rulebook isn't clear is the case of convoy kidnapping. That is when you do this. So, let's say I wanted to move Apulia into Naples, and keep the Ionian Sea where it is. Obviously there's a huge advantage to that here. The Ionian and Naples together would be able to push out into the Tyrrhenian on the next turn, and we wouldn't have this Italian fleet behind us. So, how do you do that? Two units can't swap places, right? They can swap places if one of them is carried via convoy. Let's say we issued this fleet in Ionian an order to convoy Naples to Apulia. Suddenly we've got a convoy kidnap situation, which is where Italy did not intend Naples to actually move to Apulia. It just intended to tap. But the fact that it's now going via convoy via the Austrian unit means that it goes round here, into Apulia, and the fleet in Apulia swaps places with it and gets into Naples. On most sites this is completely forbidden. On web diplomacy, whenever you move to an adjacent province and you have the option to go via convoy, you have to explicitly say, I'm going via convoy to get there. But on Backstabber, let's just resolve these orders a second. As you can see, a Naples to Apulia succeeds. I'm just going to quickly enter retreats here. And you can see they've completely swapped places. Backstabber is one of the few sites that doesn't take the recommendation. I've spoken to the Backstabber developers about this before, and they said it's because they felt that it was more interesting with that in the rulebook. And I actually really like that. I really like this possibility, as long as people know it's a possibility. It's not something that comes up very often, but it's absolutely hilarious when you can pull it off, and this is exactly the situation where it would be incredible.